Kaisa is the queen of adaptability. Her identity changes depending on the build she goes for, and thus based on which abilities she evolves. Let's see the builds. The first one is AP Kaisa. AP Kaisa starts with Doran's Blade. When you first buy, you want to get cool and tier. So you want to go back for the first time at 850 gold. And then you will want to buy your Manamune, buy your Sapphire Crystal, and by doing so, you should have your Q evolved very soon. Then you will buy your Luden's Companion as soon as you can. And at this point, you can start to play the game. Until then, you should think of yourself as a Kale with a slightly better laning phase. I recommend that you should buy boots after you have finished your Luden's Companion. You can go for the CDR boots, the Sorcerer shoes, or for the Symbiotic Souls. Then depending on your runes, you can follow up with Crypt Bloom, Shadow Flame, Rabadons, Horizon Focus, or Void Staff. The second build that we're going to talk about is Asian Kaisa. I didn't know whether it was of Korean or Chinese origin, so I figured I'd cover both. Anyway, you start with Statikk Shiv, you go for Pickaxe and Longsword. This will cover your Q evolve. Then you will want to finish your Essence Reaver and go for Shadow Flame. You do not want to complete your tier 2 boots before you get your first 3 items on this build. You can buy either Boots of Lucidity or Sorcerer Shoes on this one. And you have many options depending on the situation that you are facing. This build is kind of a combination of the classic and the AP Kaisa. So you want to keep autoing as well as shooting W's on cooldown into the people that are in front of you. Now for the build that I use. You want to start with your Doran's Blade and Health Potion. Then you want to get your cool as soon as possible to start stacking that. Then you will want to buy your Statikk Shiv as soon as possible and your Pickaxe. Now, this build is going to proc your Q at exactly level 8. This is why cool is not optional. I always go with. So after Ginzu's and Berserker's Greaves, you will want to buy a dagger. This is the point at which you need to decide whether you are going for Nashor's Tooth or Terminus. You are deciding that whether you are going these 2 items depending on your team's needs. So if your team has mainly AD damage dealers, then you're gonna go for the Nashor's Tooth. But if you are forced to deal some significant amount of AD damage, then you will go Terminus. Let's see the follow-up build when you choose Nashor's Tooth. I almost always go Shadow Flame. Previously, when Kaisa wasn't as nerfed as she is right now, I would always go Zhonya's, but I found that I need the Shadow Flame's extra damage because otherwise I don't have enough damage to carry the game. So yeah, usually I just play better and use Shadow Flame almost exclusively. After that, you have a variety of item choices. You can finish up with Void Staff if the enemy is stacking magic resistance, build Rabadons if they are not. You can build Banshees if the enemy is dealing massive AP damage, or Zhonya's if you can use it for something very good. Let's say that you have arrived to this point when you are done with your build. What I usually do is at the late games, I sell my Statikk Shiv for Blade of the Ruined King. You need to buy something with AD, otherwise your Q won't get it progged. I found that Blade of the Ruined King is the best candidate for this, but in rare cases, you can go Kraken as well. Let's suppose you'd have to go Terminus. We will buy Terminus, and after that, you still have a choice to make. You will need to decide whether you want to go full AD or want to go more hybrid. If your team is very AP heavy, then you want to go full AD. I almost always just go Blade of the Ruined King because it just covers most of your bases, and after that you can finish up with some situational items. For example, Immortal Shield Bow if the enemy has assassins that want to kill you, but their damage is not exclusively AP, so you want to cover all bases. If they are AP heavy, you can go for Move to Mortius, or you can just go for Bloodthirster. It's a very respectable choice. You can also round this build out with your Zhonya's. And now onto the 4th item, Shadow Flame with Terminus. So this build is very good because Shadow Flame synergizes very well with Terminus. You can actually go hybrid because of the fact that Terminus gives you 30% armor and magic penetration when stacked fully. Let me emphasize that this build is worse than the full AD or the full AP one. However, in situations in which your team requires hybrid damage, because if you go full AD or full AP, the enemy can stack armor or magic resist and thus counter most of your damage. And by going this, they literally can build against you and your team. So basically you're choosing to deal less damage so that your team deals more damage overall. Fourth item, Shadow Flame, after third item, Terminus, is very good because Terminus's magic penetration percentage synergizes very well with Shadow Flame's flat magic penetration, not to mention the extra magic damage on targets below 40% HP that allows us to crit. And it also procs our W evolve as well. This is the ultimate hybrid build for Kaisa. Alternatively, you can also go Zhonya's instead of Shadow Flame if you want to build a bit more defensively. It serves the same purpose, but deals less damage. You can even build Shadow Flame as well as Blade of the Ruined King. With this build you will have sustain, percentage HP damage, it's just very good. It just synergizes very well with Kaisa's kit if you want to go full hybrid. Regarding the Kraken Slayer versus Statikk shift debate, I agree that in a vacuum Kraken Slayer is better on Kaisa than Statikk shift. However, we need to consider the cost. Statikk shift is 400 gold cheaper and it allows you to get prio faster as well. Getting Kraken instead of Statikk delays your Q evolve, your second item and your third item, which is Kaisa's bread and butter, by 400 gold. In my experience of playing almost 200 games of Kaisa in this season, you should only go Kraken if you are versus 2 tanks or one very strong tank like Sion or Cassante that you need to chew through. So, in the laning phase, think of Kaisa as an ADC Kha'Zix. Kha'Zix and Kaisa as well thrive on isolation. For example, let's take a look at Q. If we hit 3 targets with it, it spreads the damage and deals 65 damage to each. But if we isolate it, we deal almost twice as much. Similarly, her W is also much easier to hit if the target is isolated. Now imagine that this dummy is your enemy champion that you want to hit, and this represents the minion waves. Let's do it a bit more clearly. So these are melee minions. W is not really easily hittable, so yeah, isolation is very good. I will now explain the combos that Kaisa has. On lane, you want to auto-Q. This is your short trade. Try to isolate the target as much as possible. Try to hit as few other targets as possible. Let's say your target is behind minions. What you can do is pressing Q and W after each other to hit them cheekily, like so. Another trick you can do is pressing W and immediately flashing through minions or other enemy champion, like this. This is very hard to react to. This has to be predicted by the enemy team. Then of course we have the bread and butter of Kaisa, ult W. Many people make the mistake of ulting in immediately after W hits the target, but if you wait a bit and wait for your W's cooldown to come off, then you can kind of guarantee to hit it as well. All you have to do to hit this combo is to press ult and then W afterwards, like so. Something to take note of is that the distance from where you are ulting matters in terms of when you should press your W, because the W cost is the same amount of time. So basically, if you are ulting from further, then you want to press your W with a bit of a delay. Because otherwise this can happen. This is because the W is being cast from your current position after the W cast animation is being fired. So this combo works from a shorter distance, but the same timing is not correct. You need to wait a bit more. Consider this scenario. You are trying to maximize your damage on an enemy champion that is under tower. What you need to do is press auto Q and E out before the tower shot hits you. Like so. Otherwise you risk getting shot. Kaisa's ultimate ability actually is an auto attack reset, like so. If you want to use it for auto attack reset only, the shorter the distance, the better. There is a niche combo that I actually never use but I know of, is that you can, similarly to RW, RE so that you are in stealth. This is mostly useful if your E is already evolved. If you're using this, then the enemy won't know where you are ulting because you are doing it in stealth, so it is very good for escaping. So, evolution cancelling. To master this skill, all you have to do is go into training mode like I am and practice it for a while. Eventually, it will stick. All you have to do is click first and then press B. What I do is spam B after I clicked once or twice, but you have to make sure that the click goes first and B afterwards. The B can be substituted with E if you want to move anyway. So basically you're going like this. Yeah, that's it. It's very useful not to waste some time while you are walking back to the base. Or if you are in mid-fight, because you can get some of the evolves through leveling up, the Q and D specifically. As for the ADC matchups, I decided to make an alignment chart, showcasing how hard each matchup is, as well as classifying them based on how hard the lane is against them. It's very hard to talk about ADC matchups in a vacuum without considering the supports, but here it is anyway. Let's start with Vayne. Vayne is a very easy matchup if you know what you're doing. You have the push advantage, and that is what you need to abuse. She is very easy to kill, especially in the early game. You also counter her very hard if you can hit your W, so it is still kind of a skill matchup, because later on she can outplay you since she can abuse her stealth, unless you hit your W. Yeah, I've only met Akshan once. Let's just ignore him. I don't think you're mating him anytime soon. The next is Jhin. Laning phase is kinda neutral, but later on you outscale him. You are countering him thematically because he wants to shoot from afar, so if any CC or your W is landing on him, you can just one-tap him. Many people consider Ezreal to be a winning matchup for Kaisa, and to an extent I agree as well, but I still consider it to be a skill matchup, because if Ezreal is very good, then he's hard to beat. Zeri is the closest to a skill matchup you'll ever get. I literally don't know anything that either champion is better at than the other. Okay, let's consider Severe. Laning phase is not that easy, but in theory you are outscaling her. Our win rate is very good against her. Many people consider Jinx to be a very good matchup for Kaisa, but if she knows what to do at level 1, with Kraken she can get priority, and then the lane is in her control. So you can outplay her later on, and you can assassinate her if the stars align, but it is not so simple. I think it's a skill matchup. Caitlyn is very similar to what I just described about Jinx. Same thing applies. Lane is rather hard, but we are thematically countering her as well, because she wants to keep her distance, and we are good at abusing such champions. Lucian is actually somewhat of a skill matchup. We are kind of at a disadvantage on lane, but eventually we outscale him. Kalista is very hard to lane against, but we are similarly to Lucian outscaling as well. Kalista is a harder lane matchup, as you can see. Misfortune is very hard to play against on lane, but we are thematically countering her as well. We can dive in on her later and just one-tap her. Samira is kind of a skill matchup as well. On lane we're even, and later on we're even. It is a skill matchup. She will want to press her W when you are pressing yours, and the answer to that is just not pressing it whatsoever, because without W I think you should be able to win the 1v1, since she can't stack her combos up to ult you. Make sure not to QW at the same time, because she can block both of it then. Twitch. I've heard RetIRL mention that Kaisa in theory counters Twitch, but according to the win rates and my experience, that is not the case whatsoever. There are some windows where Kaisa can one-tap Twitch, and Twitch can just all in her like other ADCs, because if you hit isolated Q and W, you can one-tap him before he one-taps you. But if he opens from far with his ult and you can't get in range to immediately trade back, then he can kill you still. Varus counters are pretty hard, but it is still a skill matchup in my opinion. Kog'Maw is rather hard to play against on lane especially, but if you can get out of lane, then eventually you might be able to one-tap him with your team's assistance. Avoid his W at level 1 at all costs. If you can play around it and poke him out with your Q, you can get a win. For me personally, Xayah is a very hard matchup, especially on lane. But it is a skill matchup. You can win it. It's not a complete loss. Tristana is very good at all-inning, and you don't really have too many tools for such champions, so I think she actually beats us in a full all-in when she has all her abilities for sure. Aphelios is countering us. He, I think, outscales us. And lane is also pretty hard against him, if he knows what he's doing. Those are rare though. Ashe is one of the classic counters to Kaisa. It's very hard to play against her on lane, but at level 1 you can actually all-in her and win it if your support matchup is not terrible, because her WCD is 16 seconds while your Q is 10. So if the all-in lasts for more than 10 seconds, then you have the advantage. Try to abuse this fact. Personally, my permaban is Draven. I just despise this champion. I never want to play against it, because if my support makes a single mistake, or my jungler, and one of them dies to them, then there is not much to do. He gets such a huge cold injection from his passive ability that is very hard to come back. It is winnable though, not completely lost. One might even consider it a skill matchup, but I just don't like to tempt fate. And lastly, Nilah. I don't remember the time when I won against Nilah. No matter how completely fisted she gets on lane, it's just impossible to win against that. I theorized that maybe going Exhaust and Ghost without flash might be the way, because you can get Lethal Tempo, stack that shit up. When she wants to all-in you, you can exhaust her, maybe going even double exhaust if your support is also taking it to counter cleanse, and Ghost out of her range, and then try to kill her after her W is on cooldown. Lethal Tempo is very good against her, because you might be able to stack it up while her W is spinning. While your autos won't deal damage, your Lethal Tempo is getting stacked, so if you can get away without dying while she is using her W, you can kill her afterwards. Again, I don't remember when I beat her, but I don't ban her because she's very rarely picked. Support matchups. I decided to make a list about the supports based on how good they are when paired with Kaisa. This tier list is made in such a way that it supposes that the supports are being played optimally. And we're not going to factor in how hard the champion is, and how likely it is that the support that's playing this in your elo next to you is going to play it well or not. So, I'd say that Pyke is the undisputed best pairing with Kaisa. It's just way too good, and the pair can even be seen in pro play. Everything that you can see in the A tier is very good with Kaisa, because from a rather high threshold, if you are focusing the same target, you're able to score a kill in one go. Everything you can see in B tier is either not an engaged champion anymore, or is not going to fully one-shot a single target when full sending them. While it is true that Kaisa is very good with engaged champions, and those are the best pairs for her, it is still true that with Enchanter as well, she can be played rather successfully in certain scenarios. It is significantly more difficult for the player though. When playing with engaged supports, you need to be ready at all times to follow up on their engages depending on what they are. So for example, if Pyke lands a hook, you need to be ready to go and send your W into the stunned and hook target. Same with Nautilus, same with Leona, Rel, etc, etc. With Enchanter supports, you want to play around their shields and heals, so slowly poke the enemy team down until like 50 or 40%, and then you can full send them. And when it comes to team fighting with enchanters, make sure to front to back and stay next to them, and do not dive in with your ult out of their range. With Yuumi you can just abuse the triangle rule, so if you do that you should be golden. I wanted to give this tier list to give you an idea on what you can expect from each support champion. In general, I'll play Lethal Tempo, especially when I'm with enchanter supports, but in very rare cases when I know that we can one-tap people if the engages are landing, for example with Nautilus or Pyke, you can consider going Hail of Bleeds, but keep in mind that unless you snowball hard in the early game, you are going to be considerably weaker later. If it works, however, it's going to feel very fucking nice. Summoner spells. I advise you to always bring Flash on Kaisa. As for the secondary summoner spells, my default is heal because of the element of surprise, and because it can help your teammates as well as yourself. Whenever my enchanter support brings heal, I would consider going barrier, and I would bring cleanse over both of those if I am forced to bring it. For example, against a Leona or a Lissandra, Zoe, Lilia, something that absolutely must be cleansed, or you will die. You can consider bringing TP when you are against an AP mage, or if you are in a team which doesn't have enough TPs to cover the side laning part of the game, and your mid laner is, for example, bringing heal, or barrier, or ignite instead of TP as a mage. That guy will have some issues with side laning and might not allow you to go to mid, so yeah, TP is pretty useful if you want to join the fights. Exhaust could be very good against all-in champions like Nyla, Samira or Tristana. And Ghost could be very good to gap close against champions like Caitlyn. For example, you can cheese Caitlyn at level 1 with Lethal Tempo and Ghost, you will not lose that all-in. Now for the Secret Souls part. What are the things that you need to learn if you want to play Kaisa well? If you realize that the enemy champion is being chased, then you can, for sure, know where it's going to be, so your W will never miss. Environments such as walls and choke points are also very important factors when it comes to landing your Ws consistently. Try to look out for those. If you want to deal the most burst damage possible, then try to hit your non-evolved W when your passive stacks are at 3, and your evolved W when your passive stacks are at 2 plasma points. This is probably because of a bug, but for some reason, Kaisa deals more damage when the more plasma that is being applied by your W is required to proc your passive. Many people think of Kaisa as a dive champion, but I'm saying that you should not be afraid of front to backing. This is one of the key aspects in which I changed for the better. Don't be afraid of front to backing, especially when you are with enchanter supports, and don't ult away from those. I have lost games because of this. What I'm trying to say is that you should be playing according to your comp. If you have a dive comp, then for sure, dive. That is your best bet at winning the game. But if you don't, then feel free to front to back. And wait for your chance to ult in for the backline later on. There will be scenarios in which you can maximize your Q damage by ulting to a position in which you will only hit your primary target. Try to look out for those as well. Since Kaisa is very good at 1v1ing, you should make sure to look out for opportunities when you can 1v1 your opponent. Especially during the times when you are isolated in 1v1 during some parts of the bot laning phase and on the mid lane. Another thing to keep in the back of your mind is that whenever you are ulting in, you have about 2 seconds to make something happen. Basically, if you are ulting in and within 2 seconds you're not killing your main target, then you will probably die a miserable death. And with that, we've arrived to the end of this guide. If you have any questions, leave a comment or stop by one of my streams. Liking the video is appreciated, subscribing is celebrated. Thank you for watching the video, and see you next time. Peace!